Howdy folks, Dave here at Thunder Mesa Studio, and I'm over here by the Gruesome Gulch layout because it's time at last to get to work on the spooky subterranean realm known as Cadaver Caverns. Not much has changed back here since I built the layout last year, but over the next couple months I'm going to be finishing up all of the scenery and structures and adding in the special lighting and animation effects that'll really bring this to life, so to speak. Finishing the caverns is going to be a big job, and I've often found that the best way to tackle a big job is to break it down into several smaller jobs. With that in mind, I think I want to start down here at the bottom and work my way up. And that means we're going to kick things off with a bang by installing the spooky special effects for the underworld River of Lost Souls. An underworld river of death or river of souls actually figures prominently in many of the world's ancient mythologies, with perhaps the best known being the river Styx from Greek mythology, which is well described in Homer's Iliad. The word Styx, for those keeping track, actually translates to mean a shuddering fear of death. So the question becomes, how do we model that? And there's a lot of different approaches you could take. You could do it in the traditional model railroading fashion by using poured resin and just make it kind of green and murky and maybe put some skeletons in there or something, but it wouldn't have any movement to it. And I really want movement. What I want is something that's spooky and spectacular, and I think we're going to have to turn to modern technology for that. So what I really want is the look of ghosts literally rising up out of the water or boiling up. And the only way to achieve that effect that I'm aware of is with digital projection technology. Now, I remember back when digital projectors first came out, they were like, this big and $1,000. And then they got a little smaller and less expensive, and they got a little smaller again and less expensive. And now you can pick them up that are about this size. You can even get smaller ones than this. This is a Philips PicoPix Nano. I got it over on Amazon.com, and I will drop a link below if you're interested. And the idea here is to mount this down below the layout, basically inside the stand. And it will project up onto the river itself from the bottom. This is going to be a rear projection effect. When I first roughed in the scenery in that area, we put a piece of plexiglass down that I fogged by sanding it. So it's kind of this white smoky surface. And that's perfect for doing a rear projection effect like this because you'll be able to see the projected image, but not the projector itself. The second part of this equation is this teeny little micro SD card. These projectors will work. You can plug your phone into them. You can use USB or a little SD card like this. And I have preloaded onto this a short movie that I made using clips from Atmos FX. Now, those of you who have participated in haunts and things like that, big elaborate Halloween decorations, are probably familiar with the company Atmos FX. They're a pioneer in the digital projection industry. If you've ever seen somebody with the singing pumpkins on their lawn or ghosts in the window or all kinds of spooky effects, most of them originally came from Atmos FX. And you can pick up these animations from them as digital downloads for, $12, $15, $20. It's not expensive at all. So I selected several clips from Atmos that I thought that would work, and I downloaded them, and then I edited them all together into a longer clip that I can play on the digital projector and have it loop down there. So something is always happening down in the River of Lost Souls. So what we're going to be doing in this video today is basically finishing off the area around the River of Souls, finishing off the river bank itself, figuring out the perfect placement for this digital projector, and the other lighting effects that go with it to kind of blend it all together and make it work. Got a lot of ground to cover. Let's get started. The first thing I want to do is create a source for the river where it's coming out from underground. And so I've got a piece of 1-inch thick polyurethane carving foam, and I'm just sketching in a face here, kind of a demonic face. So the river is going to be issuing out from his mouth, and there'll be some glowing red amber lights back there behind that. Now, just need to carve this. The first thing I want to do is carve out these openings, the eyes and the nose for the light to shine through. I'm using a little keyhole saw, which is excellent for that. Working with polyurethane foam is very different than other foams. Not using a hot wire cutter on this. Foam's way too dense. Using basically woodworking tools. So it's a lot like carving wood. Or in this case, it's kind of like carving a pumpkin. And as I carve this, I'll go back several times over to the scene and make sure it's fitting properly and good matching up with what's there, or will be easy to blend. Now I think the basic carving is done, but I'm adding some cracks to it. I want this to look like it was, carved by some ancient force right out of the living stone eons ago, and it's slowly crumbling away now. Take a wire brush to the thing to get any loose bits off and smooth that out a little bit. Okay, so before I glue this guy into place, I need to block in all the foam behind him and kind of finish that off, the interior of this cave or whatever, and paint it because I won't be able to reach it later, and run wiring for the LEDs for lighting up the back of his eyeballs, etc. This is a 5mm amber flickering LED. Just trying to get it positioned properly here, right in the middle. And that should give us a nice fiery glow behind our dude here. Right, I'll just switch off the overhead lights. Turn on the DC bus. That switch is right here. There we go. Not bad. Now I've mixed up a small batch of thick Sculptamold, because I want to blend these foam layers together back here where they're going to show through the open mouth. Nothing too fancy, just to make it look like something other than foam back in here. It's all going to be painted really dark. A wet paintbrush is really handy for blending this together. I think that's good enough for this purpose. Let all that dry overnight. We'll come back, get some paint on it, and we'll be off to the races. Just finishing up painting all the Sculptamold back here using the same scenic base coat that I used on the rest of Gruesome Gulch. That kind of pewter gray. Being real careful down here near the water's edge. I don't want to paint the surface of the river. And once I get this all painted, put Mr. Face into place. Need to come up with a better name for him than Mr. Face. Also a good idea to get this guy's basic paint job done over here at the workbench before I install him. So first, a coat of scenic base color. While he's still wet, I can go in with some of these other shades of gray. Do kind of a wet into wet blending. This is a, what is this? Dark blue gray. Just to give it a little variety. And around the openings, like the eyes, got some really dark gray. This is pavement. If that paint's still wet, it's really easy to just blend it together. Let's let that dry before we do the next step. Now I'll use my dark wash on here. And this is just a black acrylic paint diluted with a whole bunch of water. So it will run back into all of the cracks and crevices that I created. Really bring out that detail. All right, let that soak in and dry. Now I can go back and dry brush over everything with the original base color. I don't want to lighten it too much at this stage. Now I've got a slightly lighter shade of gray, mixed a little bit of granite gray in with that pewter. Come back over certain areas, like his cheekbones here. All right, I think that'll work for our stone face of doom. Let's go put him in the scene. Well, the old Loctite power grab. Let's see, right about. All right. Well, I hope you don't mind. I've skipped ahead just a little bit. I've spent the last couple of hours trying to figure out the best way to do the rock work for along the river here, and really for all of Cadaver Caverns. This is kind of a test case, a proof of concept for all the scenes here in Cadaver Caverns. And as you can see, I'm carving it out of the same pink XPF foam that I did just about everything else on the layout out of. I'm using the same technique that I used for all the rock work on the front of the layout, except down in the caverns, instead of the rocks going, diagonally like they do up here on the front of the layout, I want them to go vertically to give a sense of, big open space down in here, big open cavern, almost a cathedral-like feel. And this technique, by the way, I'll recap it for you. The pieces are measured and then cut out with a hot wire cutter. Then I go back and do a little bit more carving with a utility knife or hobby knife, and then use a wire brush to put a lot of final detail grain into it and texture, and then a heat gun to go over the whole thing, and that really brings it all together. It gets rid of all the little fuzzy pieces of foam, kind of solidifies it, and makes it much easier to paint and finish. Give our guy kind of a rocky crown here. Here we go. Now he's a proper lord of the underworld. I also thought it would look pretty cool if one of the supports for this upper bridge was made out of the same deteriorating stone. Kind of frames this scene in too a little bit better. Down along the bank of the river where it meets the surface of the water, I'm using a hot knife, just drawing some lines in here. I kind of like the look. It's almost like veins, or it's very creepy, or at least it will when it's all painted. This is the same technique I use basically on what I call the background rocks, the ones that are not right up in the front of the scene. Just go over the foam with the hot knife to give it some texture like this. All right. I think that ought to do it for the rocks along the river. Obviously, there's a lot more rock work to finish inside the caverns, but today we're concentrating on the River of Souls, and I would like to move on to the next step, which is going to be blending some of these pieces together, in particular our stone face with the pink foam up here. And I've got a new product that I want to try for that, at least it's new to me. This stuff is called Foam Tack Foam Filler Putty, and I picked this up online from a hobby supplier. I will drop a link down below if you're interested. And they tell me that it's great for filling gaps in the foam and blending layers together. In the past, I would use maybe something like Sculptamold. In fact, in this very project, I used Sculptamold earlier. Or spackle. I've used spackle before. This is not spackle. This has a different texture and consistency to it. It's more putty-like, and they tell me it won't shrink, which is something that spackle does do. So I'm going to go in and apply some along these seams and different places where I want to blend these layers of foam together. I'm just going to take my damp paintbrush and kind of feather these edges together. Say once it's dry, you can sand it and shape it also. Got some hard to reach spots in here. I think once this is all painted, it should blend together quite nicely. Well, it took me a minute or two to figure out the best way to apply this. Basically, you need two tools, a stir stick or something like this, to get it out of the jar, and put a glob where you need it, and then you take your wet paintbrush and push it off of the stick and blend it in like this. Actually works really well once you get the hang of it. Blends really nicely into the foam. As you can see, you can feather it right up. A little blob there. Push it off. And then kind of shove it back in to any voids you want to fill. Keep your paintbrush nice and wet. That's all there is to it. I ended up using about half the jar for this. It has a kind of a plasticky smell, but according to the label, it is non-toxic and water-soluble. So I should be able to clean up with just a little soap and water when I'm done. And I am just about done here, I think. While I continue to wait for the foam putty to dry, so we can get some paint on all of that new scenery, I want to move ahead on some more of the spooky lighting effects for inside the caverns. Basically, underneath the surface of the water, I mean, there's going to be the projection, but I also want to have a kind of a greenish glow to all of the water down there. And, well, come over here, take a look what's on the workbench, and I'll explain what we're going to do. This is the beginning of a contraption that's going to allow me to light the River of Souls from underneath using LED tape light. And this is actually an old aluminum picture frame that I happen to have in storage. I dug it out. It's just the right size. And this is one of those cheapo ones, you know, that screw together. The nice thing about it is because it screws together, I only need 3 sides of it. And I need something that's open in the middle like this so the projected image can come through from underneath. So what I want to do now is take my LED tape light and lay it into the channel, this aluminum channel here, all the way around. I think I'm going to need to get some new stickum on the back of this. This stuff is used. I've used it before, and all the stickum is gone from the tape. So I've got some 3M sticky stuff. So I'm going to take some of this industrial strength 3M mounting tape. Put it in here. All right. Now the hardest part, just getting the backing off. The profile of this frame is about 3/4 of an inch, which is just the perfect size for fitting between the bottom of that plexiglass and the frame of the layout. So I should be able to just slide it right in there. I did have to cut this off right here with a hacksaw because it was a little bit long on one side. It kind of has to go in there at an angle. Oh, perfect. Look at that. There is one of the places where you can cut these. Just happens to be right at the end of the frame, which is ideal. Now this is the little receiver unit that'll be stashed underneath the layout. Let's see, these need to go a certain way, yeah. And this is a 9-volt DC adapter. Plug that in. And we'll plug it in over here. Use the remote to turn it on. All right. Can't wait to see how this looks. This slides in right here. Just like that. And it's sitting on top of some cross pieces in the frame, and I will probably mount it in place. Something simple, probably zip ties. Let's see how everything looks. Do a little lighting test. Oh yes. I do love it when a plan comes together. Spooky. I let all the foam putty dry overnight. And so now the next step in the process is getting a coat of the scenic base color on here. That dark gray. And of course the smart thing to do would be to, start at the back and work my way towards the front. So naturally I started at the front. Now I'm going to let this dry for a couple of hours, and then I can come back and touch up any of the spots that I missed. I probably missed a lot of them, but they're really almost impossible to see while the paint's still wet like this. And in the meantime, I can put this thing together. This is a bracket for holding the digital projector. Took some measurements and then cut this on the laser. I didn't need to laser cut it necessarily, but it seemed like the most expedient way to get it done. It's basically just some 1/8 of an inch thick MDF, just a little shelf, but I want it to be removable. So there's going to be a bracket that's screwed in to the interior of the frame, and this will just slide and lock into that. Okay. Now I just need to find the optimal spot for this, and I can install it in place with a couple of wood screws. Now we're down inside the stand, and my thinking is I can get this thing in the general ballpark, then I can make the fine adjustments once the bracket is in place. Put a little piece of tape on my drill bit so it's just the depth as I need it. I don't want to go all the way through the plywood. It's kind of funny, I'm literally down here in the underworld. Okay, that works. Now with the projector dialed in where I need it, I've made some marks on here. And I'm putting on some of this black foam gasket material, just as kind of a damper, shock absorber. Just gluing it on with some Super 77. I can just trim it off and open my openings back up. So to hold this on here, I thought about a lot of different ways of doing it. But I think I'm just going to use a clamp. It's adjustable and lightweight. Well, I'll be the first to admit that that's pretty janky looking, but hey, wait till you see the effect. All right, time to finish this rockwork. I've got all the colors I need here. Got some pewter gray, some granite gray, a little dark blue gray, pavement, and some flat black. Got some brushes, and what I really just want to do is kind of dry brush on the colors and hit the top texture and bring that out. Maybe punch up the shadows a little bit with that dark gray and that black. Got my palette here, just like an oil painter. So I can take those different colors and mix them together in varying amounts. Remember, it's all going to dry a shade darker than it goes on, being acrylic paint. You see, as most of the grain goes this way, I'm going to go across the grain like this to bring out the detail. I'm taking some of these darker grays, like this dark bluish gray, and adding some horizontal lines. Get the look of ancient strata down here. I thought the gray was becoming a little monotonous, so I'm adding some color in the form of a kind of a sickly blue-green that is creeping up from the edge of the water. Now a final dry brush over everything of light gray to balance everything out, tie it all together. Nothing is too harsh in here. And there's the final paint job. I went back over a lot of the cracks and crevices with my darkest gray. I really wanted to make it look like that one bridge abutment was about to crumble. And in the proper lighting, it should look pretty cool, I think. I want a better transition here between the riverbank and the surface of the river. So I'm going to attempt something that's a little risky. I'm going to put a bead of white glue all along here on both sides, and then cover that glue with the scenic ground cover that I've used on the rest of the layout. So basically some black cinders, or dark gray cinders. And the tricky part here is to only get the glue and the cinders where I want them. Okay, well now I think it's time we turn everything on and see how the whole scene works together. Now switch on our LED tape lights. Make sure our projector is properly mounted. Now I'll switch on the lights for the face of doom. We'll turn on the digital projector. And there it is, the River of Lost Souls. First scene completed for Cadaver Caverns. Of course, I still have a lot of work to do on these bridges, so stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, I want to thank you all for watching today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and hit that notification bell if you want to see more. You can also follow Thunder Mesa over on Instagram at thunder.mesa and see all that's new on the Thunder Mesa Studio website at thundermesa.studio. And if you really like what we're doing here at the channel and would like to show your support, you can do what these nice folks did and head on over to patreon.com/thundermesa and show your support there. Until next time, keep moving forward, my friends. Adios for now.